Hi, I'm Maura. On my 21st birthday, my dad gave me the company he built from nothing. What he didn't know was that my sister had already started erasing me from it. One meeting, one signature, one missing chair at a time. She didn't shout, she planned. How do you confront someone who smiles while pushing you out? Have you ever been quietly cut out of something you helped build? Let me know in the comments. The boardroom was already full when I arrived. Every chair taken, every voice mid-discussion. No one looked up, no one paused. I stood in the doorway for 3 full seconds before a junior associate noticed me. He gave me a tight, apologetic smile and a half shrug that said, "I don't know what to tell you." That was when Celeste turned toward me, her face calm, polished. "You can observe, of course," she said. "We've already locked the agenda." I nodded, walked to the back wall, and stood with my hands folded in front of me like I was 13 again, waiting to be spoken to. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. I just watched them move on without me. After the meeting, I walked the long way back to my office, past framed awards with my father's name, past a smiling photo of Celeste from last year's investor summit. My office door was closed. No one had touched it, but somehow it still felt invaded. I opened my laptop. No invite, not even a missed ping. I checked my calendar settings. My name had been removed from the executive loop. I refreshed the company portal. My admin access was gone. I didn't call it. I didn't email anyone. I just sat there in the dim light, my fingers resting on the edge of the desk, trying to remember the last time someone had looked me in the eye and said I belonged here. Celeste once told me in high school that I always waited for the world to invite me in. "That's why you'll always be second," she said breezily, before heading out the door to a party I hadn't been told about. Francis, on the other hand, used to whisper when no one else could hear, "If they don't open the door, you build your own." And that morning, sitting in my office with the sun slicing through the blinds in pale, unflattering lines, I realized this wasn't a scheduling mistake. It was a design. They hadn't forgotten me. They had deleted me. At noon, after everyone had cleared out for lunch, I walked quietly back to the boardroom. The chairs were still warm from the bodies that had filled them. I found an empty one in the hallway, wheeled it inside, and placed it at the head of the table. I didn't sit. I stood over it. I watched the dust catch in the light. I imagined Celeste's voice repeating, "The agenda's locked." And then I imagined mine saying nothing and letting the silence undo her. Back in my office, I typed a short internal email. "Please add me to all future agendas per prior structure. Let's keep everything transparent." I didn't sign it with a title. I just signed it with my name. The rain had started again by the time I pulled into Francis's driveway. It wasn't dramatic, just that steady, knowing drizzle that made everything feel older, softer, quieter. Her house looked the same as it always had. Shutters slightly crooked, porch light humming, and the smell of cinnamon drifting out like it had been waiting for me. She didn't say hello when I came in. She didn't need to. Francis simply handed me a towel for my shoulders, walked into the kitchen, and set out 2 cups. Her silence wasn't cold. It was spacious, like she was making room for the things I hadn't yet said. I sat across from her at the old oak table, tracing the tiny crack in the wood that had always looked like a river to me. She watched the steam rise from her cup, then reached down into the drawer I'd never seen her open. When she slid the thick folder across the table to me, she only said one thing. "You were always meant to carry this." My hands were steadier than I expected as I opened it. Inside, notarized documents, transfer of corporate control, my father's signature, my name printed clean and sharp on every page. It was dated 8 months ago. I kept my face still, but something inside me cracked open like a window during a storm. All this time, while I was being erased in meetings and ignored in my own hallways, my name had already been written where it mattered. "He didn't tell me," I said finally. "No," Francis replied. "He didn't know how." She stood, walked to the far corner of the room, and picked up an old recorder. I thought it was a tape deck, something from the 90s, but when she pressed play, the voice was too familiar to belong to the past. Celeste. "You're stalling again," her voice snapped. "Just sign it, Dad. You owe me. You said I'd get it." Don't make me remind you. There was a pause. Dale's voice was low, tired. I said I'd consider it. That's not the same. More silence. Then the sound of paper sliding across a table, the pen scratching, a sigh. Frances turned it off. She didn't look at me. He never told you, she said softer now. I saved it, in case someone tried to erase you. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but all I felt was something old inside me sit down and finally exhale. I copied the files to my drive before I left, made a duplicate, then a duplicate of the duplicate. I didn't want proof. I needed permanence. Before I walked out, I looked at the folder one last time. They had erased me on paper. Now I would return the favor. Legally. The office had a smell that day. It wasn't just the overworked HVAC pushing recycled air through tired vents. It was something else. Something quieter, sharper. Like the moment before a curtain is drawn. People were avoiding my eyes again. The kind of avoidance that wasn't rudeness, but caution. Like I was the room no one wanted to enter. Even Rachel, who usually greeted me with a nod or a glance, had her head buried in her laptop as I passed. I heard it before I saw it. That hum of low conversation through the conference room wall. I slowed down, turned the corner, and saw them. Celeste, Gareth, 2 board members I hadn't seen in weeks, all seated, calm, confident. I didn't go in. I stood behind the glass for a second too long. No one turned. No one reached for an extra chair. I kept walking. It wasn't until later, in the privacy of my office, that the email landed. Forwarded by someone anonymous, probably accidentally. Subject line, vote recap interim control structure. There had been a vote, a decision, a shift, and I hadn't even been given the dignity of knowing it happened. I didn't cry, I just sat with it, let it settle. That night my phone buzzed. Rachel. 1 line. Check your inbox, I had to, I'm sorry. The attachment was a scanned consent form, my name scratched out, Celeste's inserted. Staff signatures forced, the kind of penmanship that doesn't come from willing hands. I stared at the screen for minutes, not because I was surprised, but because finally, it was real. I saved the file, renamed it asset_01_quiet_war. I thought about replying to Rachel. I even drafted it. Something like, thank you for remembering who I was before they told you not to. But I didn't send it. Some truths don't need signatures. Instead, I leaned back and let the darkness of the office settle over me. The only light coming from my screen. The file still open, glowing like a match. They had taken my seat. But now, I knew which chairs were bolted to the floor, and which ones just looked stable. The call rang once, then twice, then nothing. I stared at my phone as the screen went dark. Dale's name still glowing faintly at the top. My thumb hovered over redial, but I didn't press it. He always said the key to any negotiation was knowing your value before you walk into the room. Ask for what's fair, he told me when I was 16, sitting across from me in a worn-out diner booth after a debate meet, even if they don't like it. But now, when it was his turn to speak up for me, to stand beside me, he said nothing. It was early evening. The sun had dipped just low enough to throw long gold slats across my desk. I sat there in the quiet, listening to the low hum of my computer, my heart pressing against my ribs, waiting for something that wouldn't come. Frances knocked once and walked in. No announcement, no hesitation. She held her phone like it was something fragile, something sacred. I wasn't sure if I should show you this, she said softly, but I think you deserve to hear it. She played the voicemail without waiting for my response. Dale's voice was hushed, like he thought someone might be listening. If something happens to me, he said, the company belongs to Maura. Don't let them change that, not even if it gets ugly. I closed my eyes. Frances added, almost whispering, your sister deleted it. I found it in the phone's recovery folder, before it vanished for good. My jaw clenched, but I didn't respond. There wasn't anything left to say. That night, I sent my father one last message. I understand now. Please don't call unless you're ready to say it to my face. Then I created a folder on my backup drive. Trust broken. I uploaded the voicemail. No editing, no file compression, just raw audio, his words, his betrayal, sealed in a timestamp. Then another folder. If I go silent. I didn't fill it yet, but I would. I walked out into the hallway and stood in front of the family photo that had been hanging there since I was a kid, the kind taken at a park where everyone looks like they smiled too long. In the picture, the sun had hit just wrong, blurring my face in a way that felt accidental back then. Now, I wasn't so sure. He taught me how to fight, then stepped back when the war began. The office was quiet in the wrong way. Not the focused kind of quiet, but the kind that fills a room when someone's name has just been spoken in a low voice. When I walked past the marketing wing, conversations stopped just long enough for me to feel their absence. Slack notifications still lit up my screen, but the messages were shorter, colder, neutral to a fault. Gareth, who used to joke with me in the break room, couldn't meet my eyes. And then came the cancellation. My quarterly review meeting with the finance team, scrapped with no explanation. I already knew something was wrong. I just hadn't yet seen the headline. Until HR called me in. I walked into the conference call with a small stack of notes, thinking it was some bureaucratic update. Instead, I was greeted by strained smiles and hollow voices. "We've received concerns," one of the HR reps began. "It appears you authorized a high-risk investment last quarter that has resulted in a significant financial loss." $80,000. Celeste, on the call too, feigned surprise. I wasn't aware Maura hadn't completed due diligence. I trusted her judgment. I didn't speak right away. I let the lie settle. Then I asked for the documentation. They sent over the e-signature file during the meeting. My name was on it, my login credentials, my timestamp. But I never saw that file before today. By the time I left the building, my mouth was dry, and my fingers ached from clenching the edges of my notebook. I didn't know whether to scream or to sleep for a week. That night, an envelope arrived at my doorstep. No return address. Inside were printouts, internal emails, budget approvals, tracking logs, and a sticky note in thick black ink. "You didn't deserve this. Protect yourself. T. Thomas, the auditor." I sat there at the kitchen counter for a long time. The papers spread out like puzzle pieces that only I could assemble. And for once, the truth wasn't foggy. It was crisp, and it belonged to me. I scanned everything, labeled the folder, Foundation Ethics Submission. Then I attached the file to an email addressed to the company's ethics committee with a BCC to Legal and Francis. No explanation, just subject line. For review, immediate attention. Before I closed my laptop, I typed one more email. Short. Just to Celeste. If I'm going to be framed, I may as well choose my frame. I hit send. The sound it made felt like a door unlocking. Not loudly, just enough to know it was never really locked to begin with. Frances had asked me to stop by and pick up a tax file she couldn't locate. She said it casually, as if the timing was just coincidence, but I'd learned that very little with her ever was. When I arrived, the house smelled like oatmeal and lemon oil. Junie was curled up on the rug, her crayons scattered around a wide sheet of printer paper. I bent down to grab the folder from the counter, and she looked up cheerful, as if we were simply in between cartoons. "Mom says we're moving to Atlanta soon," she said, her voice light, offhand. "She already picked my new school." My hand paused over the folder. I didn't respond. I just smiled and nodded like it didn't crack something in my spine. I stayed long enough for Frances to glance at me knowingly and press my hand once before I left. Back at my office, the building felt too bright, too glassy. I moved on autopilot, searching through an old filing cabinet I hadn't touched in months. One drawer stuck, the second one was locked. But the third, the one Celeste had once claimed held only outdated marketing briefs, slid open with a weighty groan. Inside, beneath a few decoy folders, was a thick manila envelope. A lease agreement, Atlanta, corporate tower, 5-year term, signed 3 months ago, by Celeste. I sat down slowly, my thumb pressed into the edge of the paper until it left a dent. She hadn't just planned to cut me out. She planned to move the entire battlefield without telling me. I walked into the boardroom later that day. No one looked up. Celeste was seated where she always sat, shoulders square, voice calm, fake smile in place. I held the lease in my hand, folded once, and watched her speak about regional expansion and market sustainability. I said nothing. But I drafted the notification that night. a formal freeze on all relocation activity, pending full board review and ethics compliance. I filed it under Executive Clause 14A. Then I contacted PR. Scheduled a press briefing under the Transparency Clause my father had insisted on embedding into the bylaws years ago. They moved the company in silence, so I responded in kind. Before leaving, I returned to the boardroom, empty again. I placed the lease in the center of the table. No post-it, no message, no drama, just proof. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary. Then I whispered, only to myself, now it's my turn to move. When I tried to log into the dashboard that morning, the system blinked once and then went blank. A message appeared. Access suspended for security verification. Please contact upper-level administrator. I stared at it, not moving, not breathing. This wasn't a glitch. It was a lockout. And I already knew who held the key. I didn't call it. I didn't escalate through channels that already belonged to her. Instead, I reached for something older than the system, something quieter. I called Frances. She answered on the first ring. She's moving fast, she said. Faster than you thought. I noticed. Frances didn't offer comfort, only information. There's a drive. You know the drawer. The drawer. The one Dale had kept under the old floorboards in his home office. The same one Frances took after the divorce. I opened it that night. Inside was a hard drive wrapped in a flannel handkerchief. No labels, no passwords, just weight. I plugged it in, and the folders came up like ghosts. Backup architecture, user override protocols, audit trails. And in the middle of it, an admin file with a title I recognized but didn't expect. Backdoor_Celeste.lock, a protocol Celeste had embedded months ago. A reroute that gave her silent control if access ever shifted to me. She hadn't just prepared for a fight. She'd written her insurance into the bones of the company, but I wasn't unarmed either. I went back to the founding charter, the original print my father had notarized and filed before I was old enough to read it. Clause 12B. In the event of unauthorized structural manipulation or potential internal fraud, the assigned successor may initiate an emergency freeze without prior approval. I didn't sleep that night. I wrote. I drafted the freeze order with legal language so dry it nearly cracked. But it was airtight. By dawn, I had sent 3 messages, one to our legal compliance office, one to the ethics committee, and one company-wide. Subject line, operational freeze, immediate action. Body. This is not a reaction. This is a restoration. I hit send. Then I walked into the boardroom. Celeste was already there, sitting at the head like she hadn't just burned the building down from the inside. She looked up, poised to speak. I pulled out the chair beside her. Not mine, not hers. Neutral ground. You can keep the seat, I said, placing the lease and the freeze order on the table. I already moved the table. Her phone started vibrating, and then again and again. I stood without waiting to see if she answered. The quiet at Frances's house felt different this time. It wasn't cautious or waiting. It wasn't heavy with what might happen next. It was final. The kind of silence that arrives when no one owes an explanation anymore. I walked past the living room and noticed the mantel was bare. The photo of Celeste's family was gone. In its place, nothing. Just dust and light. Frances sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around her tea like she had no intention of ever letting it go. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't need to. We shared the silence, and that, somehow, said more. At the office, Celeste hadn't been seen in days. There was no grand confrontation, no tearful scene in the hallway, just whispers. An assistant quietly updated the org chart. Her name disappeared from the email directory. Slowly, without ceremony, the legal team sent confirmation. My authority was now recognized by every governing board. There would be no dispute, but there was no joy in it, just a slow, exhaling kind of peace. I didn't fire anyone. I didn't make an announcement. I signed forms. I restored the ethics protocols. I promoted Rachel. I handed her a key card and said, "Don't protect me, protect the company." Later, I visited my father. We sat in his den, the air stale with familiarity. He offered me coffee. I declined. We talked about the weather, about a new client he had, about Frances. He didn't apologize, and I didn't ask him to. When I stood to leave, he walked me to the door and hesitated. Then just said, "You're doing good work." I nodded. It was the most honest thing he'd said to me in years. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. The building echoed. Empty, polished, still adjusting to the quiet after the chaos. I found one of Celeste's old mugs in the kitchen cabinet. I held it for a long time before setting it down. You can take back the title. You can reclaim the seat. But you can't rewind the years they spent thinking you didn't matter. That's the part no charter can fix. At my desk, I saw something taped to the monitor. A child's drawing. 3 figures holding hands beneath a crooked sun. Me, Celeste, and Junie. In crayon, me, Mom, and you, on better days. I pinned it to the wall beside my calendar. Frances locked the door behind our final board session that afternoon. She didn't speak. She just handed me a pen. I signed the last document, Permanent CEO Authority. I didn't smile, because this was never about winning. It was about not disappearing. I used to think reclaiming something meant fighting for it, loudly, publicly, with fists on the table. But the truth is, some of the most powerful moments in life happen in silence, in the choices no one sees, in the emails quietly sent, the doors closed gently, the names you remember when others forget. If you've ever felt invisible in a room you helped build, I want you to hear me. You are not erased, you are not replaceable, and your value doesn't vanish just because someone else decided they wanted your seat. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to fight quietly to be seen? Have you ever stepped away from a battle just to protect your peace? Tell me in the comments, share your story, or just drop a 1 if this resonated with you. Let's build something honest in this space. And if you made it this far into the video, thank you. If this story touched your heart, even in a small way, hit that subscribe button. You'll find more stories here that aren't just dramatic. They're human, real, and maybe, just maybe, healing. See you in the next one.